I'm Carla Fettigan, and I am a retired nurse practitioner. I have a health and wellness business. It's a global online e-commerce business, and I help people with their health and wellness and help them change their lifestyles for a healthy lifestyle for the rest of their life. So as a nurse practitioner, I've realized that our health is so important and we need to be our best advocate for that. I finished my degree as a nurse practitioner in 2016. I started working as a nurse practitioner in women's health and reproductive endocrinology. And that was a real eye-opener to me that our healthcare system doesn't give people the time that they need and the information that they need and the accountability and the follow-up in healthcare to help them create a healthy lifestyle. It's very time structured. I love that concierge medicine has taken hold and a lot of people are switching to that because that gives patients enough time with their provider that they need, and you can really make a change in people's lives that way. But I was dictated by the clock. I was working 50 or 60 hours a week on salary and no overtime, and if somebody was running late, I didn't get lunch. And so that was starting to affect my health as well. And I had been down that road before of the stress of school and work and the grab and go stuff and not necessarily eating right or even taking care of myself in the big picture with sleep and hydration and exercise and things like that, that I didn't want to go down that avenue again. I saw it creeping up and I was like, you know, I'm worth more than this. And I really wanted to spend more time with my dad, and I wanted to really help people with their health and wellness. My dad, when I was growing up, he was a very strict parent, and both of my parents were pretty strict, but he was always there to support me in anything I was doing and always encouraging me and always encouraged me to do the best of everything that I was doing. He unfortunately had some issues with alcohol. You know, back then our parents smoked, our parents drank, and I think that has contributed to his dementia. But over the years, he's worked on improving his health. He stopped cigarette smoking and stopped drinking, but he also had some other cardiovascular issues that probably enhanced his dementia as well. In the later years, my dad was always there, and when I left healthcare to grow my business, he was my biggest supporter because he was in sales himself and had his own business. He was an entrepreneur, so he was always encouraging me through that process as well. And when I left healthcare, one of the reasons I left was I wanted to spend more time with him because I had lost my mom to cancer in 2008 and missed out on several years when she died abruptly, and I didn't want that with my dad. I saw him getting older, and I wanted to spend more time with him. So that really gave me an opportunity we get together for lunch on Wednesdays, and it was a great friendship, and we could reminisce about the past and all the fun things that we've done, and it was really great. As he got older, he didn't want to cook a whole lot, and so he got more into the processed foods, the quick, easy microwave meals. He was a breakfast skipper. Lots of times he would just do coffee and a donut for breakfast. He would skip lunch. He'd say he wasn't hungry, and then he would have dinner around 4 or 5, which was usually something to pop in the microwave or something simple. It certainly wasn't balanced, but you couldn't tell him otherwise. And then he would typically have cookies or ice cream before he went to bed. So it truly was not very healthy, and it certainly didn't do anything to help avoid the dementia.
So dementia is a collection of symptoms. So if you think about the way we think, the way we perceive the world, our judgment, if you think about our emotions, all of that can kind of come into play into kind of our our being. So dementia is basically symptoms that interfere with that cognitive ability, or the ability to think, reason, perceive place and time over, in a daily way. So if someone's not able to take care of their activities of daily living, they're getting lost, they're maybe agitated or suspicious, those are all symptoms that it might be dementia. I'm Jill Disney. I work for the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter as Senior Director of Programs and Services, serving the Georgia community with education and support for families. The Alzheimer's Association is a national organization that's really founded on the idea of a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. And we do this through accelerating global research. We are promoting risk reduction and early detection of the disease and providing care and support for those that are facing the disease. So like most of the folks that work for the Alzheimer's Association, I do have a family connection. Honestly, before I worked here, I didn't have a close family member who was diagnosed with dementia, but since I've worked here for 7 years, I've had 3 family members that we've been a part of the caregiver team. I was mostly interested because I knew that the Alzheimer's Association was engaging volunteers in the community in making a difference, and I knew that the science and the research was coming along so that for the first time there were going to be treatments and that we were learning more about the disease. So I was just really interested, and then it became, I knew of folks that had Alzheimer's or dementia, but like a lot of people in my family, we didn't know exactly what the cause was, and then once I became involved, it became closer in my family. Cognitive function refers to our thinking processes. So if you really consider everything that our body does, our brain controls. Yes, that is primarily memory, but cognitive function also includes things related to how we behave. So, our emotions, everything about how we perceive the world, our ability to plan and to perceive different things like space and time, that's all related to cognitive function.
So cognitive health refers to the ability to think, learn, and remember. So it actually encompasses brain functions like memory, attention, problem solving, and decision making. I am Dr. Swathi Varanasi Diaz. I'm a pharmacist by training and an integrative medicine expert, and my work focuses on bridging the gap between conventional and integrative approaches to health, and particularly as it pertains to muscle and cognitive function. A lot of the more recent studies have actually shown that when you have improved muscle health or you have optimal muscle health, that you actually have better chances for longevity, or what we call health span. Health span is just like the amount of time you're living, but with a good quality of life. And then muscle health also plays a role in glucose regulation and our heart health. Muscle tissue releases myokines. So these are proteins that have anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective effects. And so regular strength training has been linked to lower risks of depression, anxiety, and even neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease.
There are certain disease processes or functions in the body that might cause cognitive impairment. One question that I get almost all the time is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. Being the Alzheimer's Association, folks associate us with that disease. But if you think of dementia as an umbrella or a general term for some of the changes that happen, then you can understand that that's just the symptoms, it's the syndrome, but there is some underlying cause, a biological cause. Alzheimer's disease happens to be the most common disease that can cause dementia. About 60 to 80% of dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's disease. There are 3 hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So when we look at the brain, there are certain plaques or proteins that can build up in the brain, amyloid and tau, as well as neurodegeneration, so a breakdown in the brain that can occur. That is just Alzheimer's disease. But there are other things that can cause symptoms related to dementia, things like vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies. Some say up to 100 different causes of dementia, so different things that can impact our cognitive abilities over time. So we say that anyone with a brain is at risk of Alzheimer's or dementia. However, not everyone is at the same amount of risk. There are certain groups that may experience a higher incidence of Alzheimer's disease specifically. So women, twice as likely as men to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. We look at race and ethnic differences. African Americans, twice as likely as older white Americans to be diagnosed. Hispanic Americans, 1.5 times as likely as older white Americans. There are a number of reasons for this, and researchers are still looking at understanding more. But what this means is that we really need to have increased awareness about not just the importance of talking about dementia and Alzheimer's, the fact that it's a brain disease. As we age, things change in our cognitive abilities. It is natural for our memory and different abilities through thinking to evolve and change, but dementia is something different than normal aging through our cognitive abilities. It really is a change that impacts our daily life. So if you think about cognitive function diminishing over the course of the lifetime, some extent of that is natural and normal. But when it impacts our daily life, our ability to really take care of ourselves and others, to function independently in the world, then there might be an issue that's something more.
Well, everyone talks about how they're just getting older and they just can't handle it, especially in this technology age that we're in. His company in the fall of 2021, late summer, they were changing a lot of the ordering systems to online. They would send out a yearly cybersecurity workshop type thing for people to do online, and he kept putting it off, and come to find out he didn't know where to go with it. He didn't know what to do with it. He couldn't even work through it. And it really didn't become a problem until he told me one day that he couldn't get into the network at work. And there were probably other people that were putting it off just because they just didn't want to do it. They had other things to do, but he couldn't navigate it. And I had to sit down with him and go through that program with him. And he couldn't even conceptualize the answers to the questions, or why people would be doing phishing or scamming on email or spam or anything like that. He had a hard time with that. And he'd start forgetting things, and one day we were going to go for some printer ink for him. And we went to Walmart, and they didn't have what we wanted. He goes, well, there's a store down the road, and I know where it is. I said, well, what's the name of it? He couldn't come up with the name of it. And I said, so how do you get there? He says, well, I'll show you. And we drove, and we drove, and we drove, and he drove, and he didn't see anything that looked familiar for him. And I said, we're just going to turn around and go back to Staples, check them out. And when we got there, he's like, oh yeah, this is where I wanted to go. So I realized that there was an issue with that. And then he would send multiple copies of things to his accountant to do his taxes, and this was shortly after he was diagnosed. I realized that there was a problem. So I figured, how can I get him to his primary care? And I said, well, when was the last time you saw your primary care? Let's go check in with them and see how you're doing. And so when we went in, I had met his primary care that they both had years ago, and figured my dad had been going every year. He said, this isn't the same guy that I saw a few years ago. And especially when we were taking care of my mom, he said, he didn't know who the president was. He couldn't tell me what day it was. He didn't know the season, those 5 simple questions. And I was like, wow, we have a problem.
It's so important to be going to your annual physicals, and if you're a woman, going to see your OBGYN as well, just to get the baseline blood work and to get the physical, just to see how things are progressing. Because as we age, as we've been talking about today, it is really important to check and see how these different processes are going for your body, and in particular muscle health, because muscle health is just as much about, our body as it is about, our heart health and our immune function and all these different things. And so getting an annual checkup is so important because, you might say, oh, okay, if I go and nothing's wrong, that's great. Because we're not looking to find things that are wrong. Instead, we're looking to just stay up to date on everything that we need to know.
I think if I hadn't gone to the primary care, I would have probably just focused on little things, and I would have probably associated it with, oh, he's just getting old, because he was in his late 80s, and I thought, no, he's just getting old, because everyone says that. My grandmother does this or that, she's just getting old. And I just figured, I didn't think that dementia would ever be a part of his life. It never even crossed my mind. So when I was told that, your dad has dementia, I was shocked. I was like, time to get the research going and figure out what's going on and figure out how I can help him.
So there are some changes that happen over the course of normal aging to our memory and cognition. Those are some things that we can expect, maybe the recall of a name being a little slower. Oh, I know that person from, but then you can recall it. That's normal aging. When it starts to impact somebody's daily life, so something like getting lost, not being able to recall or trace steps, then we know that it's likely something a little more. It could be a cause of dementia, something like an Alzheimer's disease or another cause of dementia. It also could be something that is treatable. So it's important that folks that are concerned and seeing things that are out of the norm for them to address that with their doctor, because we know that things like depression, sometimes substance abuse, sometimes things like drug interactions, even a UTI can exhibit symptoms that might mirror dementia, and those are all that can be some reversible, whereas Alzheimer's disease at this time is a progressive disease, and really kind of understanding what may be expected next would be a different path for that individual. So normal aging, it's good to know what's out of the norm for that individual so that if it is reversible, it can be addressed. And if it's not, then that person can understand what changes might likely be anticipated in the coming stages. Really, what somebody does after a diagnosis depends greatly on their individual case. We know that it's more common for people today to be diagnosed at an earlier stage, which is helpful at them being involved in the planning process. But if someone's diagnosed later on, the needs are very different. So we really advise folks to to find reliable information.
When he was first diagnosed, I would get together with him often because he wasn't going to move, so we had to come up with a plan B. And so I would drive down to his house 2 days a week, or whenever he needed something, and then it became 3 days a week, and then it became calling him morning and evening to make sure that he was taking his medicines, to realizing getting a pill organizer was not going to work because it was just too complicated for him. And the saving grace was the fact that unfortunately he fell. We don't know exactly when. That was in probably early October of 2023. It was around the time my son got married. And by the end of the next weekend, he was in excruciating pain. And there again, we don't know exactly when he fell, but he ended up with a back fracture, and we ended up in the emergency room 2 times. And he was, they just said there's no way he can live at home by himself. And I think in his mind he was going to hide it because he knew that if he fell, that he was not going to be able to live in the house anymore. So he ended up staying 11 days in the hospital and having a cementing of his fracture done. And he went from there to rehab to to memory care. His dementia took a huge dive when he was hospitalized and went to rehab.
So when we work with families, we kind of work to identify, so what do you see as the thing that you want to address today? Is it somebody who's no longer, they're diagnosed later on in the disease and it's no longer safe for them to live in the home alone? Is it to find care to bring into the home? Is it for them to be placed in a facility where they can be safe and cared for? What does that concern look like?
And it usually happened in the evening that he would tell the staff that he wanted to go home. And we just told him that the rehab was part of his getting better. And then he needed to move into memory care because he needed somebody to take care of him 24/7. And he didn't think he needed that, but that's the illogical thinking that goes along with dementia, and that it's risky behavior for them. It was tough for him to make that transition. It took a good 2 months for him to kind of settle down into the routine of the memory care and do activities with them. Sadly, he's not doing a whole lot of activities with them right now because of his progression of his dementia.
Another category of folks that's at increased risk are caregivers. And at the Alzheimer's Association, we really are here to support individuals that are concerned about their brain health and perhaps cognitive issues, but also caregivers. We know that caregivers are much more likely to report some of the modifiable reasons, or the reasons that are risk factors for dementia. Things like hypertension, things like smoking, poor diet, lack of exercise, and poor sleep. And if you think about being a caregiver, of course that, you would think that they're pouring so much into the person that they're caring for that they might not be taking care of those things for themselves. What that's doing then is putting them at higher risk for dementia as well.
We actually need more protein intake as we age, which is a lot of people don't think about that. They're like, oh, I'm aging, I don't need as much. You definitely need more as you age. And if you feel like you're not getting enough from your diet, you can always supplement with a protein powder. I always recommend the importance of sleep and stress management. So, if we're doing all of these things, but we're very stressed out or we're not sleeping enough, then the body can't actually restore itself overnight. So those components are super important.
It's a family member and you're caring for someone with dementia or cancer or whatever it may be. In our world, it's dementia. It's very important to focus on your own care first, because that way you have the energy to be the best that you can be for the person that you're caring for. And that encompasses what you're eating, you're hydrating, how you're managing your stress, sleep, getting daily exercise. All those are part of the big picture of taking care of yourself first, because that will make you better at what you're doing. And I recommend that to anybody, but it certainly hit home with my dad with dementia.